All right, what's up, DFS fans? Ryan here with the DFS 5-pack. We're going to talk about some underrated things you can look at when doing your NBA DFS evaluation. In the meantime, though, if you happen to be coming across this for the first time, I'm not big with the fancy graphics, anything like that. We're just here to pound out DFS info. You want more videos, press that red button that says subscribe. And if you want to be part of the DFS 5-pack family, get access to the private Facebook group, Messenger, things like that, get the daily write-ups, go check out the website. A bunch of different ways you can sign up. We'd love to have you. Either way, though, thank you for watching. And let's just check out a couple of things. Now, we all know the basic things that we look at for NBA DFS, right? We look at pace of play, defensive positional rankings, high scoring games, things like that. These are a couple other things to make sure you check out when you're doing your evaluation, and things that you can look at that will help you get closer to the top more often. So one thing that I look at a lot is back-to-backs, both the front end and the back end of it. So every once in a while, people will tell me, I don't think back-to-backs are that big of a deal. Well, they're just wrong. They are a big deal. If you look at the way and the rotations and the substitution patterns and how coaches handle specific players in back-to-backs, it affects some people more than others. But I specifically like to look at back-to-backs as a tiebreaker when you're really close on two guys, but also in games that might specifically have a big point differential. And an example of this might be, couple nights ago, Westbrook flat out killed the Lakers. Excuse me. He was torching them all day long. Unfortunately, they got up by about 35, and he didn't need to play in the fourth quarter. Now, there was one point at the fourth quarter. I want to say there was probably 6 to 8 minutes left to go. They were up by a little over 20. If they had had a couple of days off after this, I bet you he throws in Westbrook, at least until it gets completely out of hand. But because the Thunder had the tail end of the back-to-back the next night going up against the Clippers, they saved him. There wasn't any reason to put him in. He lost his fourth quarter run. To me, that was very possibly a byproduct of the back-to-back coming up on the next day. If there hadn't been the back-to-back, he was right on that precipice. They may have thrown him in there for a couple minutes in the fourth quarter. And if you miss the cash line by a couple of points, that could be a really big deal. So it's definitely, for me, a great spot when to choose a tiebreaker. If you're on the fence on two guys and one guy has either side of a back-to-back and the other doesn't, usually I will go for the guy who doesn't have the back-to-back. It's a good tiebreaker to me. All right, past performances for a certain team. Now, you have to pick and choose your spots on this one. For example, if you were to say, give me Kyrie Irving versus the Grizzlies, there's no weird motivation there for me or anything like that. They only meet up twice a year, so even if you go back and look at the past 6 games and he's had 4 good ones, it's not a big enough sample size. There's no reason to think that that's something you should look at. So it doesn't mean much to me. However, there are certain situations where I like to look at this. Rivalries is going to be a big one. A team that somebody used to play for. A kid that grew up in New York going back to play at Madison Square Garden. These are situations where I look at a past performance versus team. Doesn't make any difference to me what DeMarcus Cousins has done to the Hornets in the past. It's not a thing for me. But let's pretend there was a Kentucky team. That would be a bigger deal for me. So that's one thing to look at. If you want to look at it granularly, go to basketballreference.com and take a look at what he did against those past matchups against his old teams, and they can tell you something. Next up, for me, this is what helps me with NBA DFS every single day, and that is knowing your rotations and your trends. And what I mean by that is I don't waste my time looking at DraftKings all night long. I don't ride the up and down wave and looking at the ownership percentages and things like that. What I like to do is I like to track the box scores. I like to track the substitution patterns. And that way I can know when guys score their points. For example, right now, Trey Lyles is one of the hot names for DFS, and he's been great. The thing with him is he plays almost the whole fourth quarter. So if it's a game that might have a major point discrepancy, and I think there's a chance that he won't be out there for the full fourth quarter, that might be a specific game where I want to avoid him. I can remember going back a couple of years ago when Tom Thibodeau still coached the Chicago Bulls, and Paul Gasol played the exact same setup every single night, and it was beautiful from a reliability standpoint for NBA DFS. So I like to watch when guys come in and out of games, and that way, if I have a pretty good feel of what the game flow is going to be, I can prepare for the number of minutes that they're going to be out there. Nothing kills a DFS player like lack of minutes. Minutes generally equal production. Obviously, it doesn't always work that way, but I think we know the more time on the court, the better off it is for you and your NBA DFS players. So know your rotations. Start tracking the box scores at night instead of just looking at the scores on DraftKings. It is the best way to get better at NBA DFS, in my opinion. You got to know when your guys score. Kevin Love is an opening act, whereas LeBron is typically the closer for the Cavs. If there's a game that I think has a major blowout implications, I'm more worried about LeBron because he won't have to be out there in the fourth quarter. You know Love's going to play in the first. All right, next up. Look for shot blockers against teams that take a ton of shots in the paint. A good example of that right now would be both the Los Angeles Lakers and the Milwaukee Bucks. Both of these teams aren't great shooting from the outside, so you look for guys who can be shot blockers against them. To me, the Lakers are the king of this right now. If you look at the way that the centers have scored against the Lakers the last couple of years, part of the big scores of centers against the Lakers comes from the fact that the Lakers take a lot of shots within the paint, giving you a lot more opportunity for block shots. So I believe if you guys can go back a couple of weeks ago now, everybody ran him that night. It made a ton of sense. So I'm not saying Porzingis was like this great, amazing play that we figured out. But one of the things we wrote up is with the Lakers loving to shoot close to the hoop, Porzingis is going to probably get 5 blocks tonight. What did he do? I think he had 5 blocks exactly. So you look for a guy who maybe only shoots, gets 1 to 2 blocks a game, but you get him in a game like that and he can get 3, 4, 5, or 6 of them. That's a big bump up on points. Like you can only score so many and rebound so many per game. If you can toss in a couple extra blocks and give you that extra 6 to 8 points, that's some big upside right there. All right, last up for the day. Look for guys, especially works for GPP. Look for guys coming into games who have maybe had back-to-back poor games or something like that, and look for them to bounce back. Now, for a long time, I did the same thing that most DFS players do, and you want to ride the hot hand. The problem is with basketball and football, it's just not as applicable. Like baseball is one thing. Baseball is all about major ups and downs, getting in and out of slumps. You don't want to pick a guy in baseball who's 2 for his last 60. He just isn't feeling it right now. However, in basketball, you can have a couple of bad games in a row, and it doesn't necessarily mean you played bad. You may have had 3 3-pointers rim out, and none of them fell. So there's a difference, and we'll just say, 3.5 to 10.5 points, depending on how many you want to assume that they made. That doesn't mean you're going to have a bad third game. Basketball is so matchup-based that if you look at the way teams attack certain teams, I don't care if you had a bad or 2 game here. Basketball isn't like baseball. It's not as streaky a game, and football even more so. So you can use those guys. So while a lot of people are still looking at what they did the last couple of games, a good example of this is going to be like Wilson Chandler the other day, coming off back-to-back bad games. Lowered his ownership. He went out and had a big game against the Phoenix Suns, but he was lower owned than you would have expected because he had back-to-back bad games. Came out with a good game. It was just 2 bad games. Baseball and basketball are different from that perspective. Now, there is one exception. If you're looking at shooters and guys who really only rely on shooting 3-pointers, that's where I care a little bit more about how they're shooting. And it's not even so much that they couldn't turn around their shooting in one day. A lot of times that gets up in their head. And I'm talking about guys like a Wayne Ellington, who all he does is shoot 3-pointers off the bench. And if he's feeling it, he'll come out and shoot. And if he's not, he'll either get benched or be a little bit hesitant. So shooters, guys who pretty much strictly rely on shooting from the outside, are the one guys in NBA that I truly like to look at their recent production. And it's not even so much about it coming to fruition again, always, as it is about their confidence. And shooters are a weird up and down bunch. Your great players like your Hardens and your Currys, they can go in and out of shooting slumps in the same game. But your secondary players like that, I like shooters who might have been a little bit hot. So that's that, guys. Thanks for watching. Trying to do more of these strategy videos. Hope they help. If you want to sign up to be a member, I'm around all day.